I don't consider CPAC to be the Conservative Political Action Committee anymore. I don't know what it is. There's a lot of wonderful people who run it. There's a lot of wonderful people who attend it. But it's screwed up. It looks like anarchy. Everything's up for debate. Well, everything isn't up for debate. Doesn't mean we have to agree on every single nuance or every single aspect of an issue, but there are basic principles we conservatives embrace. Somebody's out there pushing Mitch Daniels. I think it's Karl Rove and George Will. I'm thinking to myself, where did this guy come from all of a sudden as a national candidate? Oh, I know he's governor of Indiana. I'm up on that. But are we short on fiscally conservative candidates who are weak on so-called social issues? I don't think so. I think we've got about 50 of them lining up to run right now. So who's Mitch Daniels? Well, Mitch Daniels did increase taxes in Indiana, which is fine. Did what he needed to do. He felt he did what he needed to do. He also cut spending. Mitch Daniels was chief of staff to Dick Lugar for many, many years, who was a rhino from Indiana. Mitch Daniels was Reagan's political director for 2 years in the second term, but he was not a well-known Reagan activist or conservative activist. He came off the Hill and came into the Reagan administration, as many did in the second Reagan term and near the end of his presidency. He was also OMB director for the first 2.5 years or so of the Bush 43 administration. Now, I don't know why we should all run and say, Mitch Daniels is the guy. Did you hear his speech? And I don't know why he's picking a fight with social conservatives. Social conservatives have nothing to do with what's going on with the fiscal mayhem in this nation. Social conservatives aren't the ones running to federal court to advance a social agenda. And who are social conservatives? Well, I'll tell you who they are. They're church-going people. They're temple-going people. They're people of faith. So what are we going to do now as conservatives? Write off people of faith? Is that it? Is that the future? No, I don't think it is. I think it's absurd to make that case. And so did Ronald Reagan, as a matter of fact. Dan Reel at realworldview.com dug up Reagan's speech in 1985 to CPAC. And so I went and dug up the audio from the Reagan Library and Foundation website. I want you to listen to what Reagan had to say on March 1, 1985 to the same organization, CPAC, regarding morality in America and the conservative movement. Hat tip Reagan Foundation. Cut one, go.
Perhaps the greatest triumph of modern conservatism has been to stop allowing the left to put the average American on the moral defensive. By average American, I mean the good, decent, rambunctious, and creative people who raise the families, go to church, and help out when the local library holds a fundraiser. People who have a stake in the community because they are the community. These people had held true to certain beliefs and principles that for 20 years the intelligentsia were telling us were hopelessly out of date, utterly trite and reactionary. You want prayer in the schools? How primitive, they said. You oppose abortion? How oppressive, how anti-modern. The normal was portrayed as eccentric, and only the abnormal was worthy of emulation. The irreverent was celebrated, but only irreverence about certain things. Irreverence toward, say, organized religion, yes. Irreverence toward establishment, liberalism, not too much of that. They celebrated their courage in taking on safe targets and patted each other on the back for slinging stones at a confused Goliath who was too demoralized and really too good to fight back. But now one simply senses it. The American people are no longer on the defensive. I believe the conservative movement deserves some credit for this. You spoke for the permanent against the merely prevalent. and ultimately you prevailed.
Yes, Mitch Daniels. Yes, George Will. Yes, Karl Rove and all the others who don't quite understand what this is about. It is amazing to me how many people who want your vote, how many people who seek to draw attention to themselves by taking what are supposedly courageous positions don't take courageous positions whatsoever. Ronald Reagan was well read, thoroughly read, on matters conservative and others. He was quite familiar with the great philosophers and thinkers and scholars, including one of the most important to we modern conservatives, Edmund Burke. And it was Burke who insisted, and rightly so, that faith and morality are crucial to a healthy civil society. It didn't mean you all had to believe the same exact thing, pray the same exact way. But it did mean if you lack a moral belief system, then you couldn't be ethical. And it meant that the civil society would soon crumble, if it ever existed at all. Now, we have a guy that goes to CPAC, a relatively little-known governor, and we're told that he gave the speech of a lifetime. Did you hear the Mitch Daniels speech? Well, I heard it. I played it on the internet. And I heard what was missing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not to distance ourselves from faith. We are not to distance ourselves from morality. If the culture dies, the society dies. We don't just debate numbers, although it is absolutely crucial that we do. But they have no meaning if they have no context. Neither does the Declaration of Independence. Neither does the Constitution. Then we are left standing on the same quicksand as the liberal and allowing the liberal to take us all down and determine the terms. Many of you listening to me aren't very religious. That's fine. Some of you aren't believers in any kind of God. That's up to you. And in our great country, you can believe whatever you want or not believe whatever you want. But make no mistake, this nation was founded as set forth in the Declaration of Independence, our founding document, on the belief in divine providence, God-given natural law, and unalienable rights. If you are to put aside, as they call us, and they can include me, social conservatives, I don't even know what that means. We're conservatives. But if we are to take their term and put that aside, then we have to put aside Reagan. We have to put aside the Founding Fathers. We have to put aside Edmund Burke. And we have to write off the future of the conservative movement and the Republican Party forever. That's the problem with Mitch Daniels and all the rest who embrace such a sterile, disconnected, unmoored approach to conservatism in governing. We are not here to lead a religious revival. Not at all. But we're not going to stand still while the left and their supporters in the Republican Party try to deny us what the Founding Fathers ensured in our founding document would be forever part of this society. That's not going to happen. Hence, I, for one, can never vote for Mitch Daniels because his understanding of conservatism and the founding of this nation is at best superficial. Now, for those who are focused on the numbers, and we will be in a moment, by the way, at the American thinker, attorney Michael Fahey from Chicago, he writes, Mitch Daniels is George Will's great male hope to save his Republican Party from Sarah Palin. A year ago, George Will said Sarah Palin is not going to be president and will not be the Republican nominee unless the party wants to lose at least 44 states. And George, he writes, has obsessively repeated, rephrased, recycled that unfounded animus ever since. It's an animus George shares with liberal Democrats, who constantly caution Republicans not to nominate a conservative because a conservative cannot beat us in November. In his address to CPAC, Mitch Daniels warned the crowd, "We face an enemy lethal to liberty. I refer, of course, to the debts our nation has amassed for itself over decades of indulgence. It is the red menace," he said, "this time consisting of ink." Sadly, that red menace, lethal to liberty, was not the top priority of Mitch Daniels when he billed a substantial amount of that debt as the United States Director of the Office of Management Budget from 2001 to 2003. During his 29-month tenure, our annual surplus of $236 billion turned into a $400 billion deficit. Daniels now tells us the red ink menace is a lethal enemy. But in February 2003, as budget director, he told Time magazine's James Carney that a balanced budget is not the top or the only priority. That James Carney is now President Obama's press secretary. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.